Drew McIntyre makes a surprising return on Monday Night Raw. Apparently, there's now a transfer portal in the WWE. We talk about the deadline results as well as the ongoing news within All Elite Wrestling. We discuss all of this and more on today's episode of the J Area Wrestling Podcast. What is going on, pro wrestling fans? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Wrestling Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Jose Ramos Jr., and quite a few things to talk about on today's episode of the podcast. We're going to go and recap what's been going on Monday Night Raw, what can we expect moving forward, as well as the results from NXT Deadline, the latest premium live event, and some of my thoughts on the ongoing events in All Elite Wrestling. But we're going to talk about Drew McIntyre here to open up the episode. Drew McIntyre, who last we saw was on the losing end of one of the better Hell in a Cell matches in recent WWE memory. He, of course, had lost to longtime rival CM Punk at Bad Blood in Atlanta, Georgia, making his return this past week on Monday Night Raw. Now, why is it so important that Drew McIntyre has made his return? Well, number one, Drew McIntyre, one of the top stars in the WWE. Since coming back from his little excursion on the Indies, Drew McIntyre made his return in NXT in 2017, climbing the ranks so far as to become the WWE champion during a pivotal time in its history, during the Thunderdome era. Of course, I'm referring to the time during the pandemic. But Drew McIntyre has evolved since then. He has turned into one of the top baby faces, into really one of the top heels in the company. And it's all based on logic. You see, this had happened about a year ago when Jey Uso was basically traded to Monday Night Raw following his split from the Bloodline. And Drew McIntyre slowly but surely began to display these heelish tendencies. But it wasn't without merit. He, of course, like many others, was on the receiving end of a beatdown by the Bloodline that had occurred over the past 4 years. He, along with guys like Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens, who are still very reluctant to have any part of the Bloodline, even though Roman Reigns is kind of turning to the good side for the most part. But Drew McIntyre has remained stubborn in his ways. Anybody that has been associated with the Bloodline or has crossed him in any way, he refuses to do business with them. Case in point, Jey Uso. When Jey Uso had moved over to Monday nights from Friday nights, as I mentioned in the previous year, Drew McIntyre was very hesitant into trusting Jey Uso. You were the right-hand man to Roman Reigns, the man that ran the show for 4 years, controlled the entire roster basically through one group. Now, if I'm Drew McIntyre, why would I be so quick to trust someone like Jey Uso? Yeah, granted, maybe you're not seeing, eye to eye with your cousin, the tribal chief, but who's to say that you aren't going to create this some kind of empire in your image based off of what you've learned from Roman Reigns? Now, Drew McIntyre, I don't think was wrong in that sense, where he kind of had his reservations. I wouldn't blame him. I might have been in the same position. Maybe you would have been in the same position. But we've seen over time that Drew McIntyre developed this sense of paranoia when it came to the Bloodline. And then it moved over to Seth Rollins, who was the world champion at that point. And of course, the feud with CM Punk. What I think many people would agree is universally the feud of the year in WWE. Certainly in 2024. There's some other feuds to put up against it. But when you're talking about just pure storylines, and on top of that, matches that deliver, Punk versus McIntyre, I think, will certainly go down in the history books. But sticking with Drew McIntyre here, the last we saw was October 5th, Atlanta, Georgia. Bad Blood Hell in a Cell, when his face was covered in a crimson mask, layered out with blood, just like his opponent CM Punk. But time would pass, and now we see Drew McIntyre make his dramatic return attacking Sami Zayn. Why would he do that? What's his beef with Sami Zayn? Well, I'll tell you why, because if anything, the answer is already there. What was Sami Zayn just doing nearly days ago? He was with Roman Reigns. He was with the Bloodline, the original Bloodline, the OG Bloodline. He, along with Jimmy J, CM Punk, and of course Roman Reigns, were on the winning side of War Games. Now, it's well documented that Drew McIntyre believes that he should be the top guy. Again, with reason. He was the top guy in the company when there was no fans in attendance. And now that he has an opportunity to climb up the ranks once again, he'll do it at the expense of anyone that's in his way. But of course, Sami Zayn teamed with Roman Reigns, teamed with the Bloodline, the very same group that had an iron fist on the entirety of the WWE Universe. So, of course, Drew McIntyre sticking to character, sticking to the characteristics in which we already know. He's going to take down every and anybody that is in direct association with Roman Reigns. Now, of course, where does this lead us? Will it lead to a matchup at Saturday night's main event? I think it's too soon. Will it lead into the Rumble? Perhaps. But the fact remains that Drew McIntyre has been hell-bent on ensuring that guys like a CM Punk, like a Seth Rollins, like a Sami Zayn, that their lives are a living hell. He does not want to see these people succeed. McIntyre wants it all to himself. And I bring up those three individuals with reason, because I got to talk about that opening for Monday Night Raw. We opened the show with CM Punk. He talked about the War Games matchup, alluded to the favor that he has in place with Paul Heyman. And first of all, I must say, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of thoughts and feelings about what that favor is. But at this point in time, I don't think there is a favor. Some people are so consumed. They're so obsessed with what is the favor. CM Punk said it at the Survivor Series following the victory in War Games. He told Paul Heyman, I'm going to let you know when I need that favor. Now, of course, that's not verbatim. That's not word for word. But people have become so consumed with finding out, what is this favor? There is no favor. Not yet. Punk has it in the back pocket so that whenever the opportune time presents itself, then, and only then, will Phil Brooks, aka CM Punk, be able to cash in like he cashed in Money in the Bank, not on one occasion but two. Now, there might be some speculation, there might be some prediction as to what the favor could entail, but I certainly think in this point in time, no one knows. Maybe Punk doesn't even know. He might have an idea, but I don't think it's set in stone. So for a guy like Roman Reigns to be concerned with the wise man and asking what is the favor, I don't think there's a favor yet. I don't think so. I'm of the mindset where that will be revealed at a later date. Will it be a championship opportunity? I don't think so. Paul Heyman doesn't have that kind of stroke. Now, if Roman Reigns were to win the title, miraculously, after only losing it this past April at WrestleMania 40, if he were to regain the title, perhaps that's an opportunity that Punk could cash in on the favor and say, I want next. Perhaps. Maybe it's some kind of immunity from the bloodline or the OG bloodline, some kind of attack. Maybe. Maybe it's for the counsel of a certain wise man in Paul Heyman. But like I said, this is all pure speculation. It's just ideas that we're throwing at the wall and seeing what sticks. If you ask me, championship opportunity. If Roman Reigns, or anyone for that matter within the bloodline, but certainly Roman Reigns being the big dog, that is who I think CM Punk would want to take on. But I digress. We talk about that opening segment. Seth Rollins comes out. He interrupts CM Punk in his whole soliloquy regarding possible championship aspirations and winning the Royal Rumble this upcoming February in Indianapolis. He interrupts this promo, this segment by the Second City, saying, and you can see CM Punk's face said it all. He's fed up. He doesn't want to deal with Seth Rollins And I think he put it best in this promo. Of course, Seth Rollins wants to fight CM Punk. We've known this for quite some time. He referred to CM Punk as a cancer to a locker room. And this is no secret. A lot of people have their own reservations regarding Punk. I, for one, am a fan. But there's others who deem him too controversial, a little too hot to handle. And I think CM Punk himself would acknowledge that. But the fact is, Rollins says he should have taken Punk out the day he returned at Survivor Series in Chicago one night in 2023. But what I really took away from this is Punk he's over. He's over Seth Rollins. There's no point to fighting him, he said. He alluded to the fact that Seth Rollins had lost his World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 40. So what's so enticing about facing Seth Rollins? He talks about how Seth has had Punk on his mind for quite some time, but that Punk, quite frankly, doesn't really think about Seth Rollins. He's not of his concern. And to hear that from CM Punk, if I'm Seth Rollins, I'm feeling a type of way. You spent so much time away from the company that Seth Rollins tried to rebuild back up, only to come back, pick a fight with Seth Rollins, verbally, of course, intervene in a world championship opportunity, costing Drew McIntyre his title. And now you're saying you don't want any beef with me. Maybe not necessarily not any beef, but he doesn't deem it necessary. He doesn't care enough to fight Seth Rollins after what they went through at SummerSlam this past August. I look at that and I'm all in. I need to see Seth Rollins versus CM Punk. This is one of those matchups that I am highly anticipating. Not just because of the in-ring prospect of seeing two of the very best that the WWE has. Seeing them square off in a squared circle, but on top of that, we're talking about layers of storytelling. We're talking about similarities in personalities. Look at the way these two came up through the indies, coming to WWE, building up the ranks of the main event scene, of course, a la the Money in the Bank briefcase, winning world championships. And on top of that, the parallels. CM Punk is a guy who didn't have a certain backing of an authority. Rather than that, he actually was very combative with the authority. Seth Rollins was placed in position to be the next guy. He was flanked by people like Triple H, Stephanie McMahon. Whereas a guy like CM Punk had to scratch and claw just to stay on the main roster. He made a career of fighting off guys like Triple H, like a John Laurinaitis. So to see the parallels of those two, climbing the ranks, being where they are now, and a guy like Seth Rollins, who very much is a company guy. He's represented WWE in a positive light. But again, taking into consideration the position that he was placed in, it makes perfect sense why he would be a company guy, why he would toe the company line. And then a guy like CM Punk, who's very, very much so anti-establishment, leaving the company, leaving the business that apparently he gave his life to, essentially. CM Punk spent years on the indie scene, years in OVW, WWE, ECW, building it back up. And he left because of the way that he was treated in the WWE and the lack of respect that he felt from management. He left, only to come back, and now we circle all the way back here. Seth Rollins and CM Punk, that's on the docket. If that's not a matchup that you want to see, I don't know what to tell you. Because there's so much story there. And there's so much to explore on screen, off screen, in the ring, backstage segment. This is one of those money matchups. People would pay to see this matchup, and we still have a lot of time left between now and Allegiant Stadium for WrestleMania 41, because I have no doubt in my mind this is the match that will be there. It might even be a main event for night one, potentially. Of course, it's a little too early to predict that, but I certainly think that because at WrestleMania 40, it was heavily discussed that CM Punk's first WrestleMania in years would be against the Visionary, the Revolutionary, Seth freaking Rollins. And of course, the injury that he would sustain sidelined him for months on end, missing WrestleMania 40, albeit he was a part of it still, through a role of a commentator, and again, interfering in the post-match shenanigans there with Drew McIntyre that helped set up their feud. But why wouldn't the WWE try to attempt it one more time for WrestleMania 41? I don't see why not. Everything is pointing in that direction. And as I mentioned, we still have a few months to build this feud up. So if you're like me and you are amped to see Rollins and Punk, imagine what it's going to be like in 2 months' time. Because by the time we get to Netflix, a lot of things might change between these two. A lot of bad blood could be boiling over between two of the very best. That wasn't the only individual that was involved in that segment. Of course, Punk leaving the ring because he had a scuffle with Seth Rollins that was interrupted by Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, teammates of CM Punk, for the War Games matchup. And in that scuffle, Seth Rollins basically throwing insults at Jey Uso, telling him to go back to Roman Reigns because apparently he likes teaming back up with him. And Sami Zayn, real quick to the defense of main event Jey Uso, says, "You're not going to talk to Jey like that." And that's one thing I really admired. Sami and Jey had a tumultuous relationship within the bloodline all the way back in 2022. And to see the progress, the growth between the two, and the level of respect, loyalty that these two have for one another, you love to see it. That's why they refer to Sami Zayn as Sami Uso. He is his brother's keeper. But Sami Zayn wasn't going to allow Seth Rollins to verbally disrespect Jey Uso, who's made quite a name for himself in the last year. I think it's very important to point out that Sami Zayn isn't just defending Jey Uso because they're on the same team of the bloodline, but it's that level of respect that a guy like Jey Uso has amassed over the course of the last year, being a solo star on Monday Night Raw. He won the Intercontinental Championship recently, had World Championship opportunities, for example, at Backlash against Damian Priest. He's gotten over as one of the hottest baby faces in the company. Every time main event Jey Uso is in your city, there's people yeeting all over the place. You see the crowd chanting yeet, you see them doing the hand movements and enjoying and vibing to the entrance music of Jey Uso. He's earned his spot in the main event scene, and Sami Zayn wasn't going to allow that disrespect to head his way. He talked to Seth Rollins. He flat out held him accountable. He says, "You talk about not liking Roman Reigns, having this beef with Roman Reigns, when in fact you could argue Seth Rollins is directly responsible for the monster that Roman Reigns turned into." And Seth Rollins, he didn't deny it. He acknowledged it. He says, yes, 10 years ago, when Seth Rollins swung that steel chair in the back of Roman Reigns, it created a domino effect that is still being felt to this day. Cross promotions even. Because you can make the argument with a guy like Jon Moxley, who's running roughshod in All Elite Wrestling. He was there too in the Shield. It has become one of the more influential, significant, and historic moments in pro wrestling history, just because of the ripple effect that it has had on the industry. Seth Rollins, he's no saint. He owns it. He says, yeah, swinging the chair, again, in the back of Roman Reigns, set in motion what we have to deal with now. It is the reason why one certain tribal chief has developed trust issues, why he's become so maniacal when it comes to this power-hungry struggle that he has within the WWE, asserting his dominance across the land and refusing to let it go. Roman Reigns will not be made fool of again. He will not be betrayed. But then again, it happened at the Royal Rumble in 2023 because Seth Rollins, you see, he would point the finger back at Sami Zayn saying, you want to judge me. You want to villainize me for stabbing him in the back with a steel chair when in fact, Sami, you did the very same thing. And he's got a point. And that's why I think this segment is quite possibly one of, if not the best segments that we have seen in the WWE, certainly in the year 2024, because it was heavy on so much story. We started the night with CM Punk and his aspirations, what he's been through, where he wants to go. We then transferred over to his feud with Seth Rollins, what they've been through, what they could go through. Then we introduced Jay and Sami, two side pieces in this story between Punk versus Rollins, and then we parlay it into Sami Zayn versus Seth Rollins, calling each other out, two of the top baby faces the WWE has had in the last couple of years. And I love it. I love it because I'm walking into this episode of Monday Night Raw. I'm not expecting Sami Zayn versus Seth Rollins in the main event, but man, what a turnout. What a payoff to this segment. These two now at each other's throats because of the allegiance to Roman Reigns. One, of course, was like a brother in the Shield. The other is like a brother now in the Bloodline. Both pointing fingers at one another given the certain circumstance of the WWE right now. And of course, this would lead to the matchup. This would lead to the main event. And of course, we already talked about Drew McIntyre's participation in the storyline. And where does that lead Drew McIntyre? Is he going to begin a feud with Sami Zayn? It is possible. Will it then lead to something with Jey Uso? Because he already attacked Jey. He and Jey Uso have a history. As I mentioned last year, he had trust issues. He took out Jey Uso, Drew McIntyre reintroducing himself into the very same mess that I don't think he wanted to be a part of. But because of this hyperfixation on the bloodline and reestablishing who is the stronger of the two bloodlines, Drew McIntyre found in the middle, trying to make peace, I think, with himself. Trying to do what he could not have done 2 years ago at Clash at the Castle when he unsuccessfully challenged for the Universal title. He wants to make peace with himself by eliminating every participating party in this bloodline saga. And Drew McIntyre, I certainly think, will be a huge impact player to keep an eye on in the next year. His work in the CM Punk feud should be rewarded. He, along with Punk, again, delivered one of, if not the best, feud in the WWE and potentially in pro wrestling. Why wouldn't you want to reward a guy like that? Championship opportunities, championship aspirations. Push this guy to the moon. He is doing the best work of his career, and I'm all for it. We talk about some of the best segments of the year. I would be remiss to not talk about The New Day. Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, Big E. One of the greatest wrestling trios of all time comes to an end. We celebrate 10 years of The New Day. We had Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods in the middle of the ring, and they sat us down like two loving parents. And they wanted to reassure us that what was about to happen was not our fault. For those, of course, who have had parents who have separated, very reminiscent of that kind of a conversation. They wanted to reassure you that, hey, we have love and respect for one another, but what's happening next is not your fault. Until we are interrupted by Big E. We haven't seen Big E in quite some time. In fact, I don't think we've seen Big E since his injury back in March of 2022 when he suffered that neck injury that would essentially end his career. Now, for some reason, on commentary, they made note that it has been almost 4 years since we've seen Big E. I'm not sure what that was about. And I'm sure if you're as big of a fan as I am, you caught that. Because it hasn't been 4 years. If you were to say nearly 4 years, I'll give him 3 years. If you were to say 3 years ago that that's the last time we saw him, that would be 2021. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but was that not around the time that Big E had won the WWE title? I don't understand why they would insinuate it's almost been 4 years. Perhaps it was a slip of the tongue. Perhaps it was a mistake. Maybe he spoke too soon. Maybe a little bit of excitement crept into the mind and just overpowered him, allowing him to misspeak. But it's been over 2 years. Big E comes out and he wants to reassure them that, hey, we always have problems, no matter the fact. Your brothers are going to fight. But he assures them, he says, moving forward, I want to be back with you guys. I want to be present as a manager for Kofi and Xavier. Now, heading into the segment, like many of you, I don't think a lot of us thought that the New Day were going to make it out of this 10-year celebration. It was just a matter of how were we going to do it. My early prediction, of course, was that Xavier Woods was going to attack Big E in front of Kofi Kingston. That would have been a huge heel move. That would have established him as one of the most dastardly heels on the roster, but it didn't turn out that way. Xavier Woods, again, comes out very defensively, telling Big E, now you want to come by? While we've been arguing for months, we've had our issues for months, now you want to come in the final hour and try to play peacekeeper? No, that's not going to work for Xavier. But what got me going, what shocked me to my core, is when Kofi Kingston looks at Big E and he says, you left. You left, E. And I'm saying this now, and I feel the goosebumps coming back. Because there was pain in Kofi's voice. There was betrayal on his face. They talk about Big E breaking his neck. Big E says, I broke my neck. Like, what do you want me to do? And Kofi Kingston says, so what? The so what is crazy. He talks about guys like Austin. Austin broke his neck. Kurt Angle broke his neck. Edge even broke his neck, and they all came back. And then they go a step further, and then they talk about Big E's girlfriend. For those who don't know, she is the sister of Mia Yim. And they said that you'd rather spend more time with her than us. Throwing him and her under the bus, essentially. And I mean, I think we've all recognized that. When one of your boys is spending a little bit more time with his girlfriend, and that hit them personally, they told Big E, leave. So instead of losing Xavier Woods to the dark side, Kofi and Xavier seem to be on the same page. It appears that they will remain a unit, a tag team. Perhaps just not under the name, under the moniker of the New Day. I didn't want to see them break up, so in a way, it's a win. But at what cost? The New Day is dead. We are now in this new era for Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, full-on heels. Now, I know they were heels in the past. That early incarnation of the New Day didn't get over as quite, as much as we would have thought of with the WWE Universe. So they were heels for a time being, but it wasn't this type of a heel. They were that goofy, that annoying, that snarky kind of a heel. But this was just mean. This was ruthless, heartless. The way they spoke to Big E, the disrespect, the demeaning behavior, condescending. It's a new level for Xavier and Kofi. I very much think that they are in line for tag team championships just because it feels like they're refocused. Just like it feels like they have realigned with one another. They are now back on the same page. Look out for Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. No matter what name they want to go by moving forward, they certainly will be a tag team to watch in the coming months. We talk about Monday Night Raw. And here in the final portion of the Monday Night Raw talk here, Dominik Mysterio versus Gunther is a matchup I didn't think I would have enjoyed as much as I did. Dominik had quite the performance, quite the showing against the reigning and defending World Heavyweight Champion Gunther. In fact, to the point where the audience began cheering for Dominik. In what seemed to be a bizarre moment there, Dominik Mysterio receiving cheers? Quite the spectacle. And on top of that, you would have noticed that Gunther shed some blood there on his chest during that matchup against Dominik Mysterio. Now, whether or not it was residual effects of his battle with Damian Priest, the fact remains that Dominik put up quite the fight. And I think the biggest takeaway was the reaction of the audience. They say the best heels can make pretty damn good baby faces. Look at The Rock. Turned heel, one of the greatest faces of all time. John Cena turned heel into a rapping gimmick, became the biggest face in WWE. Dominik Mysterio, I think eventually, maybe not soon, right? But he very may well be an upcoming babyface. Again, not soon. But something tells me that this guy, he's got it. I didn't think I would be supporting Dominik Mysterio, but I gotta say, his performance against Gunther was quite the sight there. That was Monday Night Raw. We talk about Friday Night SmackDown here on the podcast, the J Area Wrestling Podcast. And apparently there's a new transfer portal. We saw the very same World Heavyweight Champion that we talked about on Friday nights, apparently leading up to Netflix. Monday Night Raw will be going to Netflix. Friday Night SmackDown will remain on the USA Network. We might see a little bit of faces on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, vice versa. We might see some change between the WWE's main brand rosters. Now, depending on who's going where, we don't know. But Gunther wasn't the only individual that we saw on Friday Night SmackDown. We saw Chad Gable, leader of American Made, as he had a matchup against Cody Rhodes, the WWE Universal Champion. And I gotta say, the matchup delivered. Quite the spectacle again. I love the little shout out to WrestleMania 20 where Eddie Guerrero fought off against Kurt Angle to the point where Kurt Angle attacked his ankle viciously to where Eddie had to remove it and still somehow picked up the win. We saw that here on Friday Night SmackDown. Cody Rhodes' ankle was the target of this attack, but he would come out the victor. Now, what was a great matchup? Again, it's one of those instances where we talk about here on the podcast where it was a great matchup, might have gotten overshadowed by the post-match shenanigans. Because Cody Rhodes, again, battered, beaten in the middle of the ring, missing his boot. And out comes Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens, of course, the former friend of the American Nightmare, someone that he had fought at Bash in Berlin for the very same championship that is in the possession of Cody Rhodes. But the funny thing is, that matchup at Bash in Berlin, how did it end? I'll remind you. Kevin Owens wasn't able to pull the trigger on Cody Rhodes. He was still in that mindset of, this is my friend. I don't want to turn to these underhanded tactics, these heelish tactics. It's not me anymore. He couldn't pull the trigger. So Cody Rhodes found a way and got the victory. Fast forward just a few months later, Cody Rhodes on the ground, on the mat, exposed ankle. Kevin Owens, without hesitation, stomps on that ankle, regaining that killer instinct. The prize fighter is back. Kevin Owens ruthlessly attacks the ankle of Cody Rhodes, which is alarming given that this upcoming weekend, Saturday night's main event, will see Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, WWE Undisputed Universal Championship on the line. Is Cody Rhodes 100%? Doubtful. But you better believe he will give it everything he got and be the fighting champion that he has been since WrestleMania 40. The show would go off the air with former friends Kevin and Cody doing battle in the front row, essentially. What a show for those in attendance. And I gotta ask the question, can Cody pull it off? Because I think a lot of us think Cody Rhodes is going to win the matchup and move forward into the road to WrestleMania 41, whether he does battle with Randy Orton, The Rock, or Roman Reigns. I think those are the three popular choices as to who he may face. But part of me's thinking Kevin Owens might pull this off. Kevin Owens is incensed. He's on a mission. He is possessed by the importance of the prize that he is fighting for. And on top of that, it's not just about the gold, it's the principle. Kevin Owens wants to make a point that Cody Rhodes is the golden boy. Everything has been put on a platter for him to enjoy. Meanwhile, guys like Kevin Owens, who have been there for years, who did not leave back in 2016, he's been there since day one when he walked in at NXT, and he's been here the entire way. Guys like him don't get too many opportunities. We talk about it here. The last time he held a world championship was the Universal title, and it was in the spring of 2017. Newsflash, it's been over 7 years. If I'm Kevin Owens, I would feel a type of way as well. This guy, Cody Rhodes, comes back, and out of nowhere, deemed the face of this era, wins the championship. And Kevin Owens even goes so far as to say that guys like he, being Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Seth Rollins, the sacrifices that they have made to help put Cody in that position, not giving credit to Cody for the battles that he had, but saying that for him to win that title and then team up with Roman Reigns was a slap in the face of every individual who had done battle with that bloodline. Kevin Owens may not be in the wrong. He may very, very, very well be in the right. I put him in similar company to that of Drew McIntyre, but nonetheless, that's Saturday night's main event. And it's surely going to be a high-profile matchup with a championship on the line. But we segue here into another championship because Friday Night SmackDown isn't just about the Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens vicious feud that has developed into quite a bitter rivalry. No. You see, another championship was on the line Friday night. We were due to see the Motor City Machine Guns Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin defend their tag team titles against the Street Profits, but another attack would prevent them from challenging for the championship. I mean, you look at the Street Profits getting attacked. You had Jade Cargill getting attacked. Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens doing battle in the middle of the ring to close the show. I mean, Nick Aldis, come on. You got to get a hold of your show, brother. You look at Monday nights. Adam Pearce, I thought that was the chaotic show, but Nick Aldis is slowly losing control of his roster. I'm just saying. But the fact is, the Street Profits were unable to challenge for said tag team titles, and conveniently, who was there to pitch his team to challenge the Motor City Machine Guns to Nick Aldis? Why, it was Johnny Gargano. He was the first one that came out and said, hey, the Profits may not be available, and at the risk of sounding a little insensitive, Johnny, he throws out his name and Tommaso Ciampa to challenge the Guns. Now, of course, Nick Aldis was very hesitant given the situation. He's a little shaken up because he's not used to all this chaos on Friday nights. But the Motor City Machine Guns were all game. They're fighting champions. They want to prove that they're the best tag team that the WWE has to offer. So, of course, the match is made. Ciampa and Gargano, they had their matchup against the Motor City Machine Guns in what I thought, again, was a solid matchup. Heavily influenced by the story that was Gargano and his unwillingness to match the energy of Tommaso Ciampa. But when the match seemed to be slipping away from DIY, Johnny Gargano slips down to Tommaso Ciampa's level delivers a good old-fashioned low blow and helps get the victory. An underhanded tactic, yes, I know, but the name of the game is to win, and DIY are your new WWE Tag Team Champions for the second time. Full-fledged heel Johnny Gargano. DIY, again, was another tag team that I was a little worried was going to actually break up, but that's two different tag teams teasing a breakup that don't break up. They rather turn to the dark side. I'm interested. I'm invested. Of course, I think the Motor City Machine Guns will get a rematch against DIY, certainly because probably fair, given that they were kind of cheated out of this matchup, and that's a matchup I want to see. But the question remains, what about the Street Profits? Aren't they going to get their title match? They should. Can they defeat DIY? They could. But will they? Well, that's why we watch the product. Speaking of the product here, we talk about championships. Shinsuke Nakamura recently won the United States Championship at Survivor Series War Games and has this new look to him. A little bit of like an evil samurai of that of a Shinsuke Nakamura, something that I'm a fan of. Shinsuke Nakamura has kind of had this run of a start-stop type of a run. We give him a little bit of momentum only to stop him there. Give him a little bit more momentum to stop him right there. He's now won the U.S. title. I think this is probably one of the last times that we could actually see Shinsuke Nakamura as a credible heel. I don't want to see them flounder someone like Nakamura, who has been fantastic in New Japan, who was fantastic in NXT. But this presentation of Shinsuke Nakamura is another step in the evolution of the character that is Nakamura. He's dived into this new dark persona, who is hyper fixated on championship gold. We saw him get the best of LA Knight on 4 different occasions, which include the matchup at War Games. And Nakamura, it hasn't been revealed who his first opponent will be, but we know that Andrade and LA Knight are 2 of the members of the roster who certainly are in line for this title matchup. I hope Shinsuke doesn't have a short title reign, because I think that only hinders the title itself, and most importantly, Shinsuke as a member of the roster. I like what they're doing with Shinsuke. I'm open to seeing more of this character-wise for Shinsuke Nakamura, but that's for Friday Night SmackDown. Let's talk about Deadline real quick. NXT Deadline was this past weekend. If you haven't checked out my reaction to the PLE, please do so. It's very brief. I share my thoughts on the Iron Survivor matchups, as well as the World Championship match between Rich Holland and Trick Williams. But for the case being here on the J Area podcast, let's talk about that a little bit more in depth, right? Obafemi and Julia are your new Iron Survivor winners, putting them in place for a championship opportunity for their respective titles at NXT New Year's Evil. Now, Obafemi, the ruler of NXT, was one of the longer reigning champions in terms of the North American title in recent history. I think the only one that really stands the test of time with him is Wes Lee, and I think it was the right call here to have him win the Iron Survivor matchup. I will say it might have been on a little bit of a predictable, because we saw that Eddie Thorpe was attacked. He wouldn't be able to compete in the matchup, and of course we haven't seen Obafemi in quite some time, so I thought this is probably now the best time to bring back the ruler of NXT, and quite a monster that is Obafemi. Him versus Trick Williams gives me a lot of the same kind of vibes of a Rocky Balboa versus Clubber Lang, Rocky 3, for all my Rocky fans out there. It's the whole brute force versus the undying will of a champion. I'm a fan of Trick Williams. I love the presentation. I love seeing the growth from being the backup, the heavy, to one Carmelo Hayes, to now being the face of NXT. Trick Williams versus Obafemi certainly would be a big fight feel. The only question is, will they pull the trigger on Obafemi? Because I feel like once you pull the trigger on Obafemi, all bets are off. This guy, the size, the speed, the aura of Obafemi. Once he gets his hands on that NXT championship, it's going to be quite the grasp to break in order to move that title to someone else. So if he were to win at New Year's Evil, expect him to have a lengthy title reign. One, because of the presentation of Obafemi, but also because I feel that the NXT roster, the male roster, I should say, is kind of lacking in the main event scene. Either these guys have already had opportunities at the title, or they're not really on the level that I personally would prefer to be an NXT champion. Do you guys remember when it was guys like an Aleister Black, Tommaso Ciampa, Drew McIntyre, Andrade, Finn Balor, Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura? These were household names. Now I know NXT has evolved into the developmental brand, but it has become that, another brand. Obafemi is championship material. He held that North American title like a champion. I expect nothing less for when, not if, but when he gets his hands on that NXT championship. But that's just for the men's division. How about the women's division? That Iron Survivor matchup that included the likes of Sol Ruka, Ren Sinclair, Zarya, Stephanie Vaquer, and of course the eventual winner, the beautiful madness that is Julia. That was my favorite match of the night. Quick shout out to Fraxium, who successfully defended their tag team titles. That was match of the night for me at a point. But then, of course, the Iron Survivor matchup blew it out of the water. NXT, without a shadow of a doubt, has the best women's division, and it's not even up for debate. But Julia wins the matchup. I think it's the right call. She did have a title matchup previously against Roxanne Perez that was interfered by Cora Jade, so it makes sense to give her another fair shot here at the title, perhaps without the interference of one Cora Jade. This one for certain is a toss-up. I don't think we have Julia lose another matchup, but if Roxanne Perez does, is she going to the main roster? Is she going to get a rematch? I feel like there's still matches that are on the card for a Roxanne Perez against Stephanie, against Zarya. I'm not ready for this title reign to end. I kind of want to see her rock for another month or two and establish dominance by achieving 1 year as the NXT Women's Champion. She certainly is, in my opinion, the best women's champion in WWE. The match, the quality of matches, I should say, alone elevate her to that level. But also, again, the word growth. It's a developmental brand, and to see the growth of Roxanne Perez, who was this plucky, baby face that everyone got behind. She was an underdog, undersized, and it became a heel. But not just any heel, the kind of heel that would beat you and embarrass you, not because she outsmarted you or because she out-tricked you, but just because she's that good. Roxanne Perez is exactly as advertised and is a prodigy. At only 23 years age, and has been trusted with so much of these talented members of the women's division. Roxanne Perez, if she hasn't already, needs to be recognized, needs to be given her flowers, and is still at the age of 23. She will only get better from here. But of course, that's in regards to the Iron Survivor winners. I do want to give a quick shout out here, as I mentioned, to Fraxium, who had a great showing. I love the story that they told from Nathan Frazier's perspective and having that comeback victory for them. It got me heavily invested in the matchup. I thought the NXT Underground matchup between Jada Parker and Lola Vice was entertaining. It's officially the matchup for Lola Vice, who has another stellar victory in the NXT Underground matchup. And of course, there was the NXT Championship as Trick Williams defeated Ridge Holland in what personally, I'm gonna call a spade here. I thought it was an okay match. It wasn't the matchup that I was looking forward to the most, and it's certainly not the matchup I would write home about. I'm a fan of Trick Williams. I can appreciate what they're doing with Ridge Holland, but it's one of those matches and one of those feuds that was a transitional period. It's meant to go from A to B. I think this was just the point of the plot where we get our hero to the next feud, which is Obafemi. NXT Deadline, though, overall a decent show, heavily carried by the Iron Survivor matchups. And we talk about carrying. AEW. Right now, if it wasn't for the Continental Classic, I don't know what I would be saying. I'm a fan of the Continental Classic. I enjoy seeing the different matchups and the different combinations that we see within the tournament. It gives me a reason to tune in because it feels like there's a level of importance to the Continental Classic. But I wanted to give my 2 cents here in regards to two certain feuds. I'm a big fan of pro wrestling. I predominantly talk about the WWE because it's in higher demand. It's one of the hottest sources of entertainment in the whole world, as well as probably the most famous or most well-known wrestling promotion by universally everybody, which is why I prominently talk about that more. But I do occasionally like to share my thoughts on All Elite Wrestling. The feud between Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly and MJF has become a little bit too convoluted for me. They're kind of stretching it out between MJF and Adam Cole, which I don't think works in their favor. It was one of the more universally negatively received feuds in the last year for All Elite Wrestling. I think the quicker they move off of it, probably the better. We don't even see MJF in the arena anymore. I understand he's filming, a movie with Adam Sandler for Happy Gilmore 2, but it has left a sour taste in the mouth of a lot of pro wrestling fans. We know Kyle O'Reilly also wants vengeance for Roddy Strong after their matchup at Full Gear. I just think with the whole Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly matchup at Winter is Coming, were we supposed to think otherwise? When it came to the Battle Royal, it was very clear those were going to be the final two. And I'm not going to fault them for having an obvious choice because sometimes the right choice is the obvious choice. But I think it's one of those deals where it's like, let's just get it over with. Have Adam Cole win the matchup. That way he can face MJF at World's End and we can just keep moving forward. But part of me is really thinking they're going to have Kyle O'Reilly win the matchup just to have this match at World's End. Don't be surprised if that's the case and they stretch it out even further, leading to maybe Revolution. I don't know, but this feud, it's been going on for too long. And real quick, I'm talking about going too long. How about going too short? Max Caster had a matchup against Swerve Strickland, the so-called best wrestler alive. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't spread a lot of negativity. I don't spread a lot of bad words regarding a pro wrestler, but I'm going to tell you right now, I can't stand Max Caster. I'm not a fan. I love the Acclaimed. I thought it was a great tag team for what it was. I'm a fan of Billy Gunn. I'm a fan of Anthony Bowens. But something about Max Caster really rubs me the wrong way. Maybe that's him just being a great heel and finding ways for me not to like him. But you don't know how ecstatic I was when I saw Swerve Strickland stomp him out on Dynamite. Now, albeit I thought it was a little bit too prolonged, I think he could have definitely had defeated Max Caster soundly in a shorter time span. But the fact is, I'm hoping he humbled Max Caster. I don't think that's the case. I think we are teasing the breakup of the Acclaimed, which I am very much interested in because I would love to see Max Caster on his own as this heel, certainly in the way he's being presented now. But I also think Anthony Bowens is a very likable babyface. I feel like he's someone that we can get behind. He has a great look. He has a great moveset. The crowd is already behind him. I'm all for it. Don't be surprised, again, when the breakup happens, Max Caster attacks Billy Gunn. Anthony Bowens comes to the defense of Billy Gunn. There's your matchup between Bowens and Caster. Bookmark it, bookend it, and you heard it here first. That's how it's going to happen. That's my predictions. But I would love to hear from you guys in terms of what your thoughts are in regards to AEW's booking, the results of NXT Deadline, the current progression of Friday Night SmackDown, Monday Night Raw. How about some of your predictions for Saturday night's main event? I want to hear it all. Go ahead and sound off in the comments below. That way we can connect and I can ask you questions. You can ask me questions. Let's just talk pro wrestling. Of course, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. Make sure if you enjoyed this episode of the J Area Podcast, give the video a like, comment down below, all those things. Maybe one, maybe none, I don't know. Subscribe to the channel if you want to watch some of these videos as well. And of course, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. I'll see you guys later tonight for the live stream following Monday Night Raw. And until then, I'll see you guys.